these community meetups, I'd like to hold them a bit more regularly. Sometime like, I don't know, my thinking was maybe a monthly or every second month kind of thing, but that's, yeah, open to discussion. Maybe we can chat about that later in the meeting. So we just do have a bit of an agenda. I think we'll try keep this meetup to about an hour. So there is an agenda, but if you want to add stuff to it or discuss other topics, by all means, there's a big add items here. So please do add items. For those watching on YouTube, there's a link in the chat for the agenda if you want to follow along, and a link in the description to all the other information. So yeah, I think the first point on here that we should probably cover is the aim of this meeting, or these meetings. It kind of started from a point of, I noticed about a month ago or 2 months ago, I started a thread on Discourse talking about a bit of slow development activity, kind of LibreTime's kind of development cycle does kind of go in waves, and it was kind of one of those lulls. And this was kind of a way to look at encouraging development, encouraging a bit more activity in the project, and to kind of keep focused on what we find important, what is useful and good for our users, and keep the platform moving forward. So yeah, that was kind of my motivation for starting it. But it's also nice to get to meet people and get to see people who I've interacted with online, and kind of get to know people a bit better. So welcome, and thanks for making the time. It's good to have you here.
Thanks for organizing it.
Anytime. So next up is a presentation, Scratching an Itch, Why We Contribute, by Lucas.
Yes, and I'll try to not make it too long. All right. First of all, I'd just like to introduce the station that actually made me help out with LibreTime in the first place. We're a community radio station in Bern, Switzerland since 2009. Through our local chapter of AMARC called Unicom, we're also like a member of the Global Association of Community Radios. We're financed by about 1,000 plus paying members, and there are roughly 200 volunteers on air on our station that help make the station great. 10 or a bit more than 10 of them are actually doing IT stuff, and we also publish lots of our stuff on GitHub. Me, I'm Lucas. I've been an IT volunteer at Rabe for like a bit more than 10 years. I'm at Hermer on Twitter and GitHub, and I was one of the original LibreTime co-founders. Before LibreTime at our station, we initially did our 24/7 live broadcasting. That was way before I started at the station, using a C64 and a couple of these 10-deck tape players. 10-deck tape players, sorry. Later on, we switched to this pile of messy cables that was based on Debian and a bunch of desktops. It was just an audio player that was managed via VNC, basically. And this was something we were wanting to replace. So we were talking to Source Fabric in 2016. We were looking to use Airtime as an on-prem solution. And I started packaging Airtime for deployment on our CentOS-based system setup. around the end of 2016. It became clear pretty fast that I would have a large patch set because there were lots of bugs in the latest release of Airtime, and I had quite the patch set going that I wanted to upstream. As we all know, upstreaming stuff into Airtime at the end of Airtime was pretty much impossible, so this prompted the whole LibreTime thing. In mid-2017, it was Rob that initiated a discussion about forking LibreTime or forking Airtime to a new name in the Source Fabric forums. At the time, I was at home the whole day because I was not employed at the time, so I began reaching out to lots of folks per email. We found a couple of interested stations that were willing to fork together with us, and we then did this LibreTime fork Manifesto thing, which we published on GitHub and on the Airtime forums, which we have since replaced. One important thing that was also in the manifesto that I think we should really also thank Source Fabric, I guess, for that they offered Airtime in the fashion they did. It has been quite some work to get it running again, as we all know, but it's really just important to see that it also has quite a legacy and that it's really lots of code hours that we didn't spend that were already in the solution, so we could hit the ground running. That was more or less how I scratched that itch for me. The itch being I was not able to contribute to Airtime. Now with LibreTime, there's a place where I could land where I landed the change set from my CentOS packaging. After that, we noticed that LibreTime, getting it to a releasable state was quite a challenge. It took quite a while for the first alpha to be released, and that still had some issues. At Rabe, my station, we moved LibreTime into production not that long ago, actually, just about a bit more than a year ago, in August 2019, and we just upgraded to the latest beta a couple of weeks ago. That's already everything I prepared. It's really been awesome seeing this whole community grow and thrive. I'd like to thank everyone that's been involved in any capacity, bug reports and everything. Everything has been really awesome. And I guess that's it from me.
Thanks so much. And it really is an itch to solve, or an itch to scratch for all of us. The next point on the agenda is progress reports, or what you're working on. My intention behind this was more just to have comments on things that are on our radar, things that we're working on, just a bit of an update on them. But yeah, no, don't feel there's a requirement to know what's happening exactly and where your plans are, or if you don't have anything to work on, that's also fine. So does anyone have anything they're working on at the moment or planning to start working on shortly?
For me, it's CentOS 8 support, which I recently started building packages, getting Ceylon up and running and tested there, getting Liquid Soap up and running. It's also going to be a prerequisite getting CentOS 8 up and running for getting to Liquid Soap 1.4, which I'm not sure how the state of is in Debian, but I think that might have to be on our agenda sometime as well.
Yeah, Debian's Liquid Soap is okay. It's a bit messed up in testing at the moment, but stable is fine at 1.3. I'm busy working with 1.4 at the moment.
Yeah, for 1.4, the change will be a bit harsher on CentOS because it really means upgrading to CentOS 8 to get a modern build chain for the whole OCaml stuff. But I got it building actually a couple of weeks back, so I'm really now just testing the whole installer script stuff and should be able to contribute that in a couple of weeks' time, I guess.
Is anyone else working on anything at the moment?
I was thinking of working on something.
Yeah.
First, to introduce myself, I'm Pat Leonard from radio614.org in Columbus, Ohio, USA. I'm a friend of Rob's. He and I have worked on WCRS LP FM here in Columbus. I got to know about LibreTime, Airtime originally, and then LibreTime through Rob. So web developer by day, pretty well versed in PHP, willing to learn anything else that is required to contribute to LibreTime. I'm interested in adding some reporting features that would help me generate the reports I need for Sound Exchange. There's just one little gap that's missing in terms of associating the number of listens and number of plays with the playout history. So there was that, and then a longer range feature that I was looking for was being able to attach metadata to longer form shows. Some of my DJs upload 1 hour or 2 hour long archives, and I need a way to show real time title and artist updating as the program plays.
Okay. I do remember, I think I actually created an issue about that first point. I remember reading, did you post it on the Discord? Yeah, that's what I'm remembering. Yeah. And I've also realized since then that things like our playout history exports require Flash, which we need to look at as well and kind of replace with something a bit more JavaScripty.
I think there's already a GitHub issue somewhere that was also
Yeah.
talking about Matomo support related to getting the listener numbers for Icecast. But I don't think anyone ever got that up and running successfully, or in the end it might have not had the needed data in it. I'm not 100% sure on what the state of that feature is.
Yeah, we'll need to try find that issue because I don't remember. Okay, and then another thing that I've been working on is a revised API, kind of allowing more of the database to be viewed and interacted with. It's currently sitting as a pull request with a draft pull request. It's still a work in progress, but it works far enough to be able to read stuff from the database and put stuff in with authentication. My current task is rewriting the API clients Python app to use the V2 API. And once that's kind of working, can review it and get things in properly. But essentially the goal of this is to provide a stable API for people to develop plugins against, hopefully new interfaces, things like that, allow us to give a bit easier of an upgrade from Zend to something else later down the line. but yeah, so that's kind of what I've been working on. I haven't had much time to do it lately, but when I get a chance, I continue pushing changes to that. And the other thing on my to-do list is to review Zach's pull requests. Cool. Next item is pain points and feature requests. Yeah, sorry, Zach. I think your mic's not working.
How about now?
Ah, there we go.
Oh, better? Oh, sweet. All right. So, like I was trying to say, my name is Zach. I'm with WRIR from Richmond, Virginia, in the United States. Our station makeup, I guess, is pretty similar to Lucas's or Hairmare's. Recently, I've been working on the docs and the website, implementing search with Lunar.js, and just making it just making the docs look a little bit better, as well as relinking all of the pages, or like the links in the LibreTime interface that would send you to documentation, which broke when we adjusted the last site. So just trying to make sure that all that's linked up. And I'm not super familiar with web design outside of Jekyll, which is the static site generator we've been using, but I'm definitely itching to either dig into Django or Vue or something for us to get started on the rewrite of the front end.
Awesome. Yeah, I need to. This week's kind of been crazy, but I need to look through that PR, and I'll probably poke you as to how I go about building it and reviewing it at a later point. Cool. So the next one was pain points and feature requests. So if anyone's got any kind of pain points or things they'd like to see implemented that isn't, well, even if it is listed as a issue that kind of should probably flesh out or target on, talk about, by all means, now's the time.
I think if I can just jump in. Hi guys. So I'm joining from South Africa. We've got a one or two community radios that we're supporting using the LibreTime platform. So yeah, we had an issue with embedding the widget. I think Para, you were there when I was actually asking questions on the group. Yeah, so the widget obviously doesn't support SSL traffic out of the box, and so what I ended up doing was obviously just spinning up a separate Icecast VM and then using a reverse proxy on the Nginx. So I think, I don't know, it's not that that solution actually works perfectly. It's just, I think if we could maybe get the documentation updated to reflect that solution, because when you just reference those docs, the install instructions really throw you off. But yeah, that's that's me.
Okay, yeah, our docs really don't assume SSL much at all, and it is a problem because as soon as you throw SSL into the mix, a lot of the assumptions that originally Airtime built on break, especially with kind of reverse proxy, and if you proxying from Nginx to LibreTime on like unencrypted, handling SSL on the reverse proxy, it becomes a big issue. Because I've run into that issue as well, and had to update and try. In fact, some of the things I ended up having to like change the code, and I still haven't got around to upstreaming those changes.
Yeah, I also went the reverse proxy route actually, but I don't even expose any of LibreTime externally. So that's probably why the widget stuff doesn't work in SSL, because I simply never tested that. Because I don't use it. But in the big picture would actually be that we should really start looking into maybe even changing the installer to support SSL out of the box.
Yeah.
Most of this is written with the assumption that you didn't have an SSL certificate to get started, because those were very costly at the time, and all of the hardware needed to like stream encrypted wasn't there at the time. But nowadays it's our station hasn't seen much traffic on port 80 anymore since we switched everything to TLS. So
in fact, I don't think I have anything running on port 80 outside of the house.
Hello, good evening. Sorry for dropping in like that, and even without video. I don't have a camera handy here.
No problem. Welcome.
I just wanted to contribute a bit to this SSL stuff, because I stumbled across LibreTime about a year ago, trying to set up a community station here in the western rim of Germany. And I hit many of the things you were talking about, because newer browsers, they frown upon connections that are not encrypted. So the front-end widgets, even if it wasn't using Flash anymore, which is still in the code, weren't working because of security violations. So actually I submitted 2 or 3 patches to start working around this, but this is a fundamental step I stumbled over when I was setting up the software. So I ended up doing an Nginx SSL proxy in front of it as well. But then I found out that the internal connection, which was unencrypted, was triggering some bad stuff in the code, because essentially there are parts of the code that doesn't discriminate between internal connections, for instance, a control connection to the playout software or the Icecast server, and external connections coming in from outside to the website or the streaming services. So this is still one big mess in the code. For instance, the internal player for me still doesn't work in the playout screen. So I wouldn't be able to pre-listen, and I'm trying, or I'm willing to contribute to this part of the code, essentially making it easier for new people to get started without jumping through hoops. The other thing that that I think is a big thing for the software is we need some kind of integration for live broadcasting. At the moment, I either have the choice to jump in and override the stream with my own software, or I have to upload to the server and play canned things. But I can do a mix from between live moderation and playing out music from the server itself. So this is the other big thing I was looking forward to, which we could maybe try to implement in the future.
Just so that I understand, are you referring to scheduling a live broadcast?
No, at the moment you can schedule live broadcasts because you can connect to the streaming ports of the Icecast server and override the LibreTime playout. So you can at any time jump in for live broadcasting from a venue, for instance. But if you want to sit in the studio and do a mix between live moderation and playout from the music archive, this is not that easy at the moment. Because even in the preview of the back end, you have the delay between the stream and the the things that are happening live. So you cannot easily mix live voice with canned music, for instance.
Interesting. Yeah.
I guess the solution to that problem is usually that you move the full stuff to the studio and don't have the audio stuff playing from LibreTime. At least that's what I guess most people have been doing. But it's true that we don't have a live assist feature, and it would be awesome if we had something like that.
Yeah, but that is the thing I was stumbling upon because I have other people here in the community radio that are not that tech savvy. So they said, we have this new software, it's working great for canned playout, but why can't I do live broadcasts without bringing my own whole set of equipment and duplicate the installation to a local studio setup and jumping in for live broadcasts? So we have essentially two music archives at the moment, one for the playout, for the random playout, and one for the live broadcasts.
Yeah, this would actually help us as well a lot for doing stuff, because at the moment I'm involved with a couple community stations who can't actually get into their studios at the moment because they, for example, on university campuses where they're blocked or where people aren't allowed on campus at all. And so being able to do live broadcasts from off campus without having to ensure that every DJ has a copy of the music library would be great.
Yeah, and the not having the library duplicated aspect would also be great. That's something that has been leading to me not really adopting that part of LibreTime on my production yet. We're basically using it for pre-programmed longer shows for the most part. But the main archive of MP3s that our DJs uses isn't stored in it yet. We just built the new studio, so I'm waiting for the watched folder features for that, because that I think would also help with the case of Live Assist having access to the same archive of audio files.
Can you guys hear me now?
Yep.
Okay, good. My setup keeps breaking, I guess. I just wanted to add to, is it okay if I call you Caveman by username? Well, anyway, my apologies. I hope it's okay. That's definitely been something I've been thinking about too, to have a bit of a live assist feature, but it might be best implemented through what Kyle's working on, the backend API, and then maybe we can build like an Electron client for desktop that'll automatically be cross-platform. And then I know there's been some talk about funding and maybe getting some more, and it wouldn't exactly be fair to everybody if we were to offer that packaged for a fee. But my thought is we could offer that package as like LibreTime Pro as like a desktop plugin and generate revenue off that, but then have the non-live assist scheduling component be free for everybody to use. I mean, of course, keep everything open source, but like I definitely think that kind of hinges on the work that Kyle's working on at the moment.
Yeah, the tricky thing is managing the delay between live and recorded. So we'll have to see how that goes. Maybe the Live Assist ends up downloading and streaming the music as well as the audio, or as well as like the live components. But yeah, that's definitely something that we need to look at.
That's a very good point. I didn't even think about that.
Sorry guys, I think I just need to be brought up to speed because I'm missing something clearly. When you're saying live, I mean, on my setup, I'm able to, connect an encoder on site to the installation on the cloud, and that constitutes live for me. What am I missing? What is it that you guys are talking about?
So what we are at least doing at our station is, instead of using LibreTime as our internet radio station, since we have infrastructure to broadcast through FM, we already have infrastructure to broadcast over the internet. So we're just using it as a playout engine. So basically, you just upload files to it, and it plays out through the sound card into our radio console. And then that gets sent through our transmitters, our stream encoder, our broadcast servers, etc. And so what we would be looking at is an ability to kind of, when we say live assist, like bigger piece of software like Zeta, for example, Zeta Radio Automation, they have the similar thing where you can schedule the shows in, but they also have the ability for you to say, okay, after this track, pause, because then I'm going to talk for a little bit. And there's a big play button that you hit when you're done.
Okay.
So, I mean, for people who are using LibreTime, I guess kind of the way that LibreTime was initially written for, as like an all-in-one internet radio solution where you just get a VM, drop it in there, and everything works perfectly for internet radio. I suppose there really isn't a need for that, because you're either broadcasting from like your computer using the encoder that you were talking about. But for those of us that are kind of just using it as like more of an on-site automation thing, that would be more of a feature for us.
Oh, I see. Okay, no, then I understand. It's like no, I get it now. Thanks.
You're welcome.
The other useful thing that it provides is it means that if you have presenters that are doing live shows, even for where LibreTime is like your drop-in solution for everything and all your output gets streamed from there, it means that they don't have to have a copy of your music database to be able to do a live show and play music in it, or ads or things like that, where if you want to play things out on like your traffic spots or happen, or your top of the hour, things like that, they can still happen without relying on the DJ to schedule and play those on time.
Okay, cool. All right.
Okay. So the next point was focusing on the 3.0 beta and releases, with a subtopic supporting like what are we targeting as supporting in terms of OS, Debian and distros, Debian, Ubuntu, CentOS, etc. So yeah, I guess there is a issue. I'll see if I can find it for essentially a list of. There we go. It's pinned. The list of blockers for beta, and what is required there. But I'm curious to hear what you all think are things that need to be done before we can release a beta for testing.
I just want to throw in there quickly that our previous solution was using Windows Media Player, and LibreTime, hands down, is significantly better than Windows Media Player. So just give yourself a pat on the back for that. I'm definitely excited for the watched folders, and I see there's 3 PRs open for it right now. Do we know what the status is for those? How close we're coming? If we can like consolidate them into one PR or kind of bring it all together?
So it's actually 4. There's one to a additional one of the forks or one of the underwear I don't know how, whatever you call them, the forks, the GitHub forks. So yeah, I think it's a kind of a mess as to where what works. I know Keone was doing work on it, but I haven't seen him around lately. So yeah, I'm not too sure what's happening there, but it does need to be consolidated and got in, I think. Cool. Welcome, Andrew and Bob. It's good to see you guys. I will bring up those questions in just a bit.
I think that we may want to add the HTTP issues to the blocker issues. I don't believe I see it on there.
Okay, yeah, that's definitely need them there.
There's also the blocker project board. Maybe it's in there.
Yeah.
Oh, okay. Let me take a look.
Yeah, here.
Okay, I see it. Yeah.
I think we need to look at both of those to really get all of the beta stuff.
I think I'm going to try consolidate those into one place.
Probably the board. Or would we rather have it in the issue?
I guess it would be good to have it in the issue because I'd imagine people, when they're first coming to check us out or to want to help, would find the pinned issue faster than the project.
It's just a bit easier to keep the project updated. There's also a tag for it.
Can I just I don't know if I'm backtracking too much now. I think we didn't really address Zach's what Zach was putting forward about, you know, kind of having a pro version. I don't know what that means for the, you know, the open source nature of the whole project, and yeah, and I don't know what it means like from a you know, how we'd even go about structuring that. But I think there is an interesting conversation to be had there.
I skipped over it just because it is mentioned further on into in the agenda as well.
Oh, okay, cool.
So, but that, yeah, we can do that for the next. I'll just rearrange some things here. We can talk about that next.
Yeah, I brought that up kind of early. Sorry. I was thinking, I'd imagine, I do see a lot of companies. The only one I can think of right now would be pfSense, but who make everything open source and then publish a community version, which gives you bleeding access, but deliberately removes some enterprise features. And then if you are going to pay for enterprise, you get like a precompiled package that I guess is fully open source, but has a little bit of closed source for the enterprise features. But I'd imagine like we could put like the free IPA support for Active Directory behind like a pro version, as well as the like a live playout. It's all I can think of right now, but just thinking of like what would a larger station need that a smaller community station would not. When I say larger, I think I'm getting more into the commercial space or more into the space of where they're being backed by like thousands of people, like for Hair Mayor Station.
I think,
sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, I think just drawing from your pfSense example, I think what they've done in their open source kind of backdrop, they kind of provide hardware which runs the open source software, and that's where I think they make their money from, in addition to, you know, their certification processes and things like that. But with us, I mean, it's not like we're now gonna start, you know, shipping hardware to you know, studios. At least I don't think in the short term. So I would believe it would need to be purely software based, whatever, you know, value add that the pro version would have in it over the community version, as opposed to pfSense, who would then you know, ship you a router, or you know, switch, or managed router or switch, and then you'd buy that, and that would come with the you know, paid for version of pfSense, versus the community version, which you'd have to install on your own VM instance, or you know, on-prem server.
Absolutely.
So I think, yeah.
Absolutely, yeah. Maybe a better example would be Nextcloud, where some of their like more enterprisey features are kind of tucked behind enterprise. And Bob and Andrew also looking at what you're saying in the chat. And yeah, no, I completely agree. I mean, like, I didn't want to say, hey, let's go buy a multi-$1,000 automation thing, you know, because it's COVID, so we can keep our programs going. Like, I know there's definitely stations out there that are completely relying on us. So not to put the whole project behind a paywall, but to think about, for those who, like, what would be like a 1% feature that only 1% of the stations would need, and then to still have it be open source in the sense that if you really want, you can compile it, but if you want a nice, neat, tidy little package or snap or what have you, to pay for that. So not to make it pay to come in, but kind of pay what you can. Because part of how LibreTime has stayed free is because, like, we've been, you know, consistently like really pushing to get this thing out, knowing that the biggest benefit we personally gain is just whatever it means to our own station.
I think one of the nicest models that I can think of is like how Ardour is doing it, the digital audio workstation. They basically are totally open source, don't have a close, not just open core, so they don't have any plugins. Nextcloud doesn't, by the way, either. They're also fully open source. It's just not good the documentation just isn't very good if you need to find everything. But in the case of Ardour, what they do, they just offer binaries, compiled binaries of their software that you get to pay for, and you can choose your own pricing. So if you don't have enough cash, you can like pay $1 and still get the binaries, and you can redistribute them and anything. So it's actually really fair, and they just ask you to like contribute what you would pay for, like going out to going out to eat for 2 people where you live. So it's kind of like also fair for people, maybe like from the global south or something.
I just want to catch up with or read out some of the comments from the chat. So Bob suggests, for a commercial version, maybe provide paid plugins for things like commercial spot airing, things like that. Andrew also has a suggestion for a 1% feature that can make you profit, but yeah, hasn't quite elaborated on that. But I do want to point out that we do have an open collective, so we do have a way of collecting money, and there's actually money in that. It's just we don't spend it, and there's no way of, or we haven't really set up the process of getting money back out of that open collective. So in fact, if I can, I'm curious to see, I want to see if I can find out exactly how much is in this at the moment. Yeah, so we currently have $430.33 sitting in sitting in that account that we don't use. So I'm a little reluctant to try and monetize things when we've got money that we just don't use already. And yes, that's not enough maybe to fund a developer full time, but maybe that's enough to start doing start at least putting some nominal values on for bugs that we think are important, or covering useful project related hosting, like the domain name and things like that. So yeah, my suggestion would be to not look at how we can spend the money that we have before we try before we hide things behind a paywall.
Okay.
Yeah, that's kind of like how I see the whole sustaining thing. I mean, it is very important, the whole sustaining, and I'm really glad that people are pushing this, but that's why it has never been like really at the top of my agenda. It's not the way I, from my station, will prefer to contribute if I can. And it was also that the way Source Fabric was going into a more closed model where they only looked after their cloud service was one of the reasons we forked. So it is a bit, yeah, I'm like building RPMs for the project, and I won't put those behind the paywall kind of thing for me.
Hey, everybody. Sorry I was late. I totally forgot that we were meeting today until I was on YouTube, and I was like, oh, crap. Wait, Wednesday? Oh, everybody's there. Luckily, like, I saw this. I was like, so I don't know. I missed the whole agenda, but I kind of am with Harriman there, or Lucas, in the sense that I think that we should try to keep things free but it is a challenge in terms of how do we move things forward. So I don't know I probably missed a bunch. So sorry for jumping in like super late.
No worries. Welcome. Yeah, Bob's input is, my fear is that if LibreTime becomes a paid service, however minimal, the tech committee at our station would prefer to pay for a proprietary Windows system. And yeah, I kind of agree with that. There's more worries about, I missed it here. Like, yeah, as Lucas pointed out, LibreTime was forked because of Airtime's focus, and I'd prefer to keep it as open and free as possible, without kind of compromising those values. And obviously we do have to consider the license we're under. We are under the AGPL, so we do need to, whatever we do needs to comply with that. Maybe shall I suggest there is a sustain channel in the Mattermost chat. So chat.libretime.org. I'm just can't type and talk at the same time. There's a sustain channel there. I would suggest maybe anyone. There we go. So yeah, those that are interested in joining or continuing this discussion, by all means, please join that, and we can take it from there. Maybe we schedule some more meetings for those people, and yeah, we can see how that goes.
I mean, it seems like we might be able to just get money by asking for it from stations that are already using LibreTime. Not in any kind of like we put anything behind the paywall, but we just say, hey, it would really help this project if we had a certain amount of funds to move to this new feature. I know that even there's more and more people using LibreTime. I guess even the Pacifica Radio Network is using LibreTime. here in the US. So like things have gotten, it's grown because people find it useful, but the challenge is, I guess, getting to the next level of, all the work that you're doing as far as the API and everything, and pushing it to like, that's going to take a huge amount of effort if we're going to actually rewrite all the code to make it work with the new system. Did we already talk about that? Because I don't want to repeat.
No, that's the next point.
Okay, cool.
So it leads on. Yeah, I've given an update on the progress there, but yeah, we haven't really spoken about rewriting things much. Andrew asks, is there video chat in LibreTime in chat.libretime.org? I don't. It's a Mattermost instance. And I don't think Mattermost supports video calls, unless there's a plugin for it. But yeah, I'd need to look. Not currently.
Plugin. There's a Jitsi plugin for Mattermost, but all it does is just post a link to a Jitsi instance into your channel. So it's really just as easy to just use Jitsi alongside Mattermost. At least that's what we're doing at my company since, well, a couple of years now, actually.
Yeah, I think probably Matrix would have been a better solution for that kind of thing, but I don't want to have everything shift again.
Yeah, and if you install maintenance, you'd be a full-time Matrix admin right now, and not have as much time for other stuff.
I do host one, yes. Yeah, I'm on the Debian team who hosts the Debian social matrix instance. But yeah, so I guess let's talk about ideas for the rewrite. Obviously, there has been, in fact, let me see if I can find the discussion on it. But one of the very first issues posted to LibreTime was talking about the framework and looking at a potential rewrite. So yeah, does anyone have any comments or stuff to start chatting about while I try find this? There we go.
I've just progressively been getting more interested in hearing more and more about static sites and genders and stuff like that. So not like we could redo an interface with Jekyll, but what if we did more of like a JavaScript, or I don't know, just not PHP. Nothing against PHP. I've just been hearing so much about like the newer stuff.
I think PHP is fine or not, but I do think that when we move it to an API, one of the benefits it will give us, if we actually are able to encode all of the different functionalities that are done currently through the web interface into an API, we'll be able to have theoretically multiple front ends. Somebody could just create a front end that would work as a mobile app, or they could create a JavaScript based one using like Vue, anything like that. So that is one of the benefits that would come with encoding all the functionality that happens on the back end currently in a mixture of PHP, Zend, into like some kind of API based thing. So, but it is a lot of work. So I guess that's what the challenge there is, getting it so that it actually is, doable. Or that, we're able to, I don't know. I'll let you can talk more about it, Kyle, because you're the one who's basically been put the most work into it so far.
Yeah, so at the moment, the API I've done is largely just, essentially it has presented the database through a REST API. So there's not much in terms of any other functionality, pause, play, that kind of thing. But there is a lot of it's very easy to read stuff from the database and push stuff to it. I am busy rewriting the API client Python app to use that API. And as I do that, more of the other functionality that's required should present itself and be implemented. Ideally, once that's done, we should be probably, I'd say, 70% of the way there in what's required for a fully working front end. And while that happens, we can start potentially looking at writing sections of the API or sections of the front end to be API driven and flesh it out that way and kind of grow it organically.
I mean, currently one of the issues with 3 is that we're using such an old, outdated version of Zend. I mean, PHP in itself is like moved, but we're using, Zend, which was created at the beginning of kind of PHP becoming popular. And it was the first attempt to create like a content management system around it. And we're still stuck with that first generation attempt at creating quote unquote enterprise friendly PHP. And so, we're running in all the issues with the different choices in terms of no longer being supported. So also like working on any kind of thing inside of it's really like, it takes a lot of effort to understand and get a good understanding of how Zend works. I think we were lucky that Lucas actually had worked on Zend before. Otherwise, the project might not have even got anywhere if we didn't have that background and knowing how, the intricacies of it. But it's very hard for me to imagine anybody wanting to spend as much time as it would require to learn how it currently exists to contribute features onto what we currently have. So yeah, we kind of need to go a new route. But it also pauses everything. Like one of the reasons why everything is slowed is like I haven't been spending a bunch of time working on all these features because it's such a pain to deal with. And we also, even just like adding the bit of functionality that was added, like the cool track types, that broke a bunch of stuff temporarily because, any database change kind of makes things and all the, different forks that people had done and works in progress needed to be changed. So it's kind of a brittle system that we've built, but it's super functional because people put a ton of energy into it and we were able to like get it working. But it is kind of, we're in a place where we do need to figure out the future. And how do we pay for the future? Is that, or basically contribute our time towards the future? Did we just lose Kyle? Looks like it.
Hopefully he comes back soon. One thing I brought up to Kyle, but he didn't like it, was the idea of having like a NoSQL database. What do you guys think about that as something more less schema focused?
I think that I don't know what the benefit that would provide to us in particular. I just don't know what it particular, like really we want to have, I think the biggest source of uncertainty right now for the project is kind of the interface to Airtime playout between the web interface and what happens with Liquid Soap. And that can do some really weird stuff if you like start, changing the schedule as is. So there's obviously some bugs there. We have never spent enough time or had a robust enough interface to really like figure out where those bugs are, but I don't know how the NoSQL interface would really fix any of the problems that we're having. I mean, it would, and I do like one project that I think that we might want to look at, and I mentioned it, I think on the develop chat, was Funkwhale is built with a Vue front end and a Django back end, and they have an API, and they're in some ways similar to LibreTime, except for they're not a radio station. They're just like a place for people to share their MP3s and create like little kind of version of Spotify or whatever. But that functionality, and their API in theory is somewhat like one of the things that we're lacking in LibreTime is a really good way to view our database. and the songs that we make up it, the make up it and the tracks. So I don't know. And it's just the fact that it's written in what we're theoretically moving towards seemed interesting, but it also, I don't know that they could be easily, they wouldn't obviously be the code base we'd want to build off of, I don't think, unless, what it could be serve as inspiration. I've always thought that having APIs that were compatible between different audio projects, like even Azuracast, and having something similar that we could all have some kind of overlaying layer of API where you could have a client that would work with, in theory, both. I don't know. It's an idea. I don't know. They have a very different strategy for how they do things.
Mm-hmm. I think one of the bigger advantages would be that everything would be served in JSON through API calls, like very basic API calls. So if the issue for us was like trying to figure out our way around Zend and Propel, and because I know a thought was that in order to make the Travis CI test for Bionic work, we're going to need to, upgrade the Zen from 1 to 2, I think.
Actually, Propel is our biggest problem, but Propel doesn't really even have a version 2 as far as I could tell. It's as far as I can tell, just based on the lack of responsiveness from the Propel developers in terms of, not wanting to merge simple fixes that would address this problem. Like they basically have abandoned it because they're doing other things. And there's other much more popular ORMs that, exist in PHP. I can't remember off the top of my head what they are, but Propel is kind of a legacy thing.
The community mostly moved to using Doctrine instead of Propel. And that's also what a bit more modern frameworks like Symfony 2 would support. So
yeah,
changing the database engine would be one, or the OR mapper would be an additional effort into even considering moving the code base forward to something more modern in the Zend part. But then again, the Zend framework, if we would rewrite to Zend framework 2 or 3 like it's now, or 4, then we would still be rewriting the whole Zend framework 1 application, because those are totally different frameworks. There's no clearly mapped path to upgrade such stuff.
Yeah, that's...
And Zend, I was an enterprise customer from theirs back when, and even Zend just told us, nah, you'll have to rewrite everything.
Yeah, so we're basically stuck with a rewrite if we want, or continuing to support and even forking Propel and applying these patches, which we were lucky, super lucky that somebody else decided that they wanted to keep Zen framework going and that we could actually push patches to them. And that's what kept it going with, anything above 1604, because otherwise we were going to have to backport PHP. It was going to be a real pain. And so, but we're at that point with Propel. So obviously we want to build a path forward, and Postgres is a pretty solid SQL database. The ORM on top of it, ORMs are always kind of this, like, from my understanding, like a cost benefit. It makes it easier to write, but then it can make stuff harder to code down the line and harder to fix stuff. Like, I was just really lucky to be able to figure out the ways to do the different features that I was trying to implement when I was doing stuff with smart blocks. But we're still stuck with, even if you look at smart blocks, it's really convoluted, the way that we're layering our ORM calls to kind of create the smart block functionality.
Gotcha. So then, would it be better to, part of me is just trying to figure out, like, if we can, like, remove one Lego and put another Lego in, what's gonna help the project rest on a more solid foundation?
Yeah.
I'm not as technical as you guys. GitHub has been showing me all sorts of recommendations for stuff like that recently. So, I don't want to pass around too much because I know that Kyle's working really hard on the API, but I've seen stuff like Direct Us, which I put in the chat, and a couple other things. So is it just if we can find a better middle layer between PHP and the database, is that what we're looking for next?
I think that in theory, Django will be that middleware. The biggest challenge there will be trying to keep a Django version running with our current version so we could slowly replace the parts and aspects of it and create an API that fully functions without breaking something. And I guess there's like, Kyle can correct me, but he created actually mappings between the different things. So now there's even writing based to the database, and it doesn't break the ORM right now. And it's a whole nother layer, but you have to, any database changes in the future will require like a double, we'll have to do them in Propel and this mapping of Propel to Django. Mm-hmm. But that doesn't seem that bad because we don't need to change the database too frequently. And it's always a real big problem, when we do. So adding another thing isn't, and if the goal is to move away from, Zend and Propel in the future, I think I'm not a big Python person. I'm not an anti-Python person. I just haven't been a part of a Python project as much, although I've done some stuff with, to fix Airtime. But it would make sense, I think, if Django is like versatile enough, then we could do that as the backend, the new backend that kind of takes over for PHP, and we'd still keep stuff in Postgres, right?
Yeah, we can. In fact, if you want a example of a Django backend view frontend, it's semi-working. Let's put it at that. But it's a project called BelowConf, which I've posted in the chat.
Did you hear me mention Funkwhale, which is, I think you had dropped off right when I mentioned Funkwhale, which is also,
it died.
It's Vue and Django too. So, and it has an API, and it's based on audio files. So in theory, my crazy idea, which would take a ton of time to actually make work, would be you could have like a Funkwhale instance for your station that would then in turn provide like an additional layer for the library that you could use for LibreTime. And I don't know if that works, but they do have some cool functionalities like, tie into Music Brains. So tracks could automatically be recognized, etc. I don't know. It's a different goal though. They have a totally different goal. But I'll check out BillowConf.
Yeah, it's not exactly the best example of code, but it is a project that uses both.
I'll add Funkwhale to the.
Yeah, add as well. Definitely. I don't know if it's being.
Because I think their main developer is basically realizing that he has to step away, but they've gotten a lot of money actually in terms of like some kind of grants. So they have some kind of I think it's I don't know. They got a big grant for Funkwhale.
Okay, nice. Yeah, I did see the maintainer notification, but I've never actually really used it.
I installed it and it looked cool, but I didn't really I haven't done anything in terms of their backend. But their backend does use Vue and Django, so that's what made me think.
Yeah.
That it could be like something we could look at just in terms of.
And if just for a way of going about it, for an architecture and a setup, even if we can't directly use any of their code.
Yeah, I'll throw their architecture up. Because they're also using Celery. They've added in Redis, but otherwise they're using Celery, Django, and Vue.js, as well as they also have a compatible API, that uses that can work with subsonic compatible things. So like a lot of apps that you would use for your phone.
Yeah.
So I don't know, just a thought. But what do we need to do to, I guess, go forward with making something that we can all contribute to? How far are we from something that we can start playing around with?
So you can already play around with the API. It should just work in a Vagrant instance.
Is it already installed in our code base? Like you could just
So no,
Or
so
is
you
there
have
a
to
fork?
you have to use the PR.
Okay.
So I'll put the link in. And hi, Andrew, do you want to give it a try?
Test 1 2 1 2.
Yes, we can hear you.
Cool. Hi, everybody.
Good to have you.
I don't know what you guys were just talking about, so because I had to reboot, but I wanted to throw in that I have a few ideas. I have a few ideas regarding the funding aspect, but it would require looking at, like you mentioned, plugins, and trying to find a way to do it so that let's just say that like it doesn't take away from the core LibreTime project. It makes it more like a service that's web-based. But like the core project still gets funding out of the, like it's kind of like Apache, right? So like Apache is the core of what runs stuff that gets layered on top of Apache, that kind of makes everything work together for the internet. So that's the concept that I'm thinking about, and I have a few ideas around that. If I can maybe keep in touch with anybody that's one of the core developers or a few of the core developers.
So one of the issues you might run into doing anything is that as part of the AGPL v3, like you have to share any code that you put on a server.
Well, that's okay. I mean, look, it would be more like I'm thinking along the lines of like Red Hat. So I don't know if they ever went totally proprietary, but I don't think so.
Yeah.
So like, whereas SUSE is different. SUSE I think SUSE has got some proprietary stuff in their distro, but yeah, more like Red Hats. So I don't know.
Like service.
SUSE, but yeah, service and like kind of a lot of people. Let's just say that I've been working on something and I think that it could be quite cool, but it's kind of like I want to try and get your opinions in a more private setting.
Okay. Sounds good.
So if we could maybe keep in touch on Skype or whatever you guys use, then we can have a chat. That'd be great.
Yeah, cool. Sounds good. Maybe ping me on the Mattermost, and we can take it from there.
Cool. Is that like the same as an IRC ping? I'm gonna have to look up.
Yeah, it's just chat.libretime.org.
So I just type /ping your username and then it'll.
I don't know.
Yeah, or I can send you a message and.
Okay. Cool. I am on there at the moment, so that's cool.
Awesome.
Cool.
Great. Thanks, guys.
Cool. There we go. Okay, but yeah, in terms of the API stuff, I need to just check what that actual documentation is. I can't remember what I did last week. But it should be kind of just, yeah, Vagrant up. And then once you've restarted stuff, start the Django server. But all the details are in that API with that, or in that PR. It's README under API. So if anyone wants to play around with that, test it, anything like that, all the details are in that PR.
Okay. And do we have a API? It's currently only documented in the README. We haven't kind of put anything on one of these API designer kind of web interfaces. Like, let me think.
No, but you can browse it through navigating to local host on port 8081.
Okay. Yeah, I think I was thinking of Swagger or the Open API thing that kind of replaced. Like, I don't know if that's compatible with it or.
It is.
There's
a plugin for it. So this uses Django REST framework.
Okay.
Which
cool.
should definitely have a. So there's a web browsable API, but there should definitely be a plugin to do a Swagger browsing as well.
Okay.
I think I even have a project somewhere that does this already, but I think it's something internal at my company. So it is possible. We use this often.
Oh, okay.
And the built-in API browser is actually really nice. So I found that I don't actually use any Swagger stuff too much
okay.
as I'm implementing external clients.
And yeah.
Okay. Bob asks, is the old Airtime API still available in LibreTime? I think it's that's read only. Is there a new API to make changes, i.e. schedule changes? So I don't. Did we pull out rip out the old API? Any of the old API?
No, it's still there. It's under the Airtime API, which is a weird mixture of like they developed a Python client or something like that they use for some things, but then they also have a web interface through Zend. So it's really it's an incomplete thing in terms of like there's a lot of different people that built LibreTime over time when it was Airtime, and they would come and they would join up and they would do a lot of work and then they would walk away for whatever reason, and then they'd bring on a new team. So there's a lot of different stuff like that. Like even I think the first thing that we might want to rewrite would be the podcast functionality, just because the podcast functionality uses Angular and it was already kind of like thrown on top. It uses some version of Angular 1, and it was kind of like thrown in together in a way that was incompatible with the rest of the way things were done. It was attempting to use the API more often, and I think it uses like the API to pull a list of tracks and different functionalities that, so it might be a good place. I don't know. I guess somebody would just have to start working on it.
Yeah. And then, Andrew, to answer your second part about whether there's a new API to make changes, that's the pull request we're busy discussing at the moment. There will be, it's not currently in master.
There is also, Andrew, you asked about is there a way to delete podcasts? There is not. That needs to manually be done. Your station will just continue to grow until you have terabytes of podcasts, if you're like my station.
Or until you run out of disk space and have to go back and delete stuff.
that would have been a nice, yeah. Luckily hosting it, we have a pretty big drive.
Actually, I'll add that to the list of features. I think there's a ticket for it, but I'll try to find it.
I think the biggest question would be, is it really complex since it's able to download on a schedule, is there a lot more programming involved in deleting on a schedule because it's a whole different kind of area of code, or like the downloading is kind of perhaps quite easy, but to remember where that file is, it's like it has to make an entry, right? So it's just interesting. I just don't know how much coding that would take because I'm not one of the coders. So is it a lot more complicated?
It's just a different thing. There's more concerns, in terms of how you would delete stuff, whether you want to delete stuff. It just, once something's deleted, one of the problems we have is the file gets deleted. I think it also deletes all the information in the database. So, but the track schedule still exists. So we really, in some ways, if we're trying to save disk space, you don't want to delete the metadata of that file down the line.
It's kind of like you would potentially want to create like an early warning system, which would probably be a lot easier to do because disk space is becoming more and more cost effective. You could have a early warning system to say, hey, your disk is getting full, and maybe there's third-party stuff that works with that, and then basically you never really need to delete anything because to buy like another 2 terabytes or whatever could be quite cost effective, really, especially with cloud, right?
I think the bigger problem is the clutter of our library as it gets larger and larger.
Oh, right.
The people navigating it to select tracks can find themselves. And that's, the challenge, I think, with the reason why people would want to delete files. And we may even just have like there's all these ideas, and we have lots of good ideas, like making an idea where you have the file just hidden, but the actual version of the file is stored. So if you ever need to do, like not a recycling bin, but an archive would make a lot of sense for some people, but also some people, like especially the people that are using this or are using Airtime or something like that, where they have such a small, like people that are paying for Airtime Pro would have probably benefited from this a lot more because they're not running on their own hardware and they only give them 20 gigs of space. So if you're severely limited, then
well, I mean, I'm sitting with
space a lot easier.
I mean, I think anybody that installs it themselves, and I've got a terabyte drive at the moment, so it makes more sense to hang on to files just in case you need them again. And then maybe there's a way to make it based on date and then also based on importance. So you could have importance level, or you could have favorites, and then you could have a date managed system. And a lot of people probably would know, okay, wait, we wanted to go back to that interview that was done in like September 2010 or whatever it was, and then you can find it easily if you have the rough dates of when you were doing that, what year it was in. You can narrow it down, but it probably involves quite a lot of, like, maybe there's some third-party code or something that allows people to look for dates in databases, something like that.
Oh, well, you could easily reference it in the database to find. I think we could even expose more of the database. Databases are pretty versatile in terms of being able to write a query. The challenge is sometimes in mapping that ability to something that makes sense to people that aren't familiar with SQL. And so that's one of the challenges that the UI has currently, is it uses a lot of SQL even with the bare minimum amount of translation, in terms of like M time, modified time, it doesn't always, it's not always set up in the watch directories. Yeah,
it's kind of like you'd have to have some kind of a system as well for the timeline, where you could actually potentially eventually, if the coding was, if it all worked properly, it wasn't too complicated and that didn't take away too much development time away from other critical things, then you could have something where it would be so cool. You could say, okay, take out everything from this date to this date, and I don't want to listen to that anymore because that's out of date. And then store it in the archive or the trash can or whatever we're going to call it, right? So that's just a theory. I mean that's like, because like you said, the timelines or the smart blocks and things that are grabbing from certain folders are getting bigger and bigger and bigger, and then eventually the easier way to do it would just be to say, okay, anything from this date to this date, like in terms of interviews, etc. Because a lot of the time people, unless it's classic stuff that on a radio station, you might want your classics to still play, but that would be like, once again, in a favorites folder. I don't know. Anyway, I'm hypothesizing stuff and conceptualizing stuff, and you guys are probably thinking, "Oh my gosh, that's so much work. That is so much work."
Yeah, I think we're all thinking like that. I'm thinking like, I had that idea a long time ago, and I didn't have the time to do that work, and I haven't, because there's a lot of these like things that we could do that would be amazing to make it even a better product or a better like piece of software, but it. Wading through the code to get even the little bit of features and functionalities that I did took a lot more time than it theoretically would if you had a more modern API that was more well-defined and not involving like software archaeology to like decipher what somebody was thinking when they created this particular thing and why it's so weird. So that's been, the fact that we have this project going is pretty amazing, because it's a testament to the idea of free software in general.
Indeed. I have to say on that note, thank you so much to all of you, because until LibreTime came around, I had completely given up on Airtime. And so you guys are the reason why I'm still pressing forward. And thank you guys so much.
It's a pleasure. And it's actually LibreTime is one of the reasons I can run a business.
Just out of interest, what business are you doing radio full time?
Supporting running one radio station's pretty much entire stack at the moment on LibreTime, because they can't get into the station.
Wow.
Because they're on a university campus that is currently shut. So it's part of what I do.
Very cool, man. We should keep in touch, because I think I need some pointers on trying to configure some of the stuff. I'm sort of running,
Awesome.
flying blind a little bit at the moment. But yeah, it's like great to be in touch. I just wish that there was a way that we could ping each other that was from an app or something, because obviously we're not always logged into the live chat. I don't know, maybe you guys are quite a lot.
No, it's not as used as much as it in theory could be, but this is the first time actually I think that many of us have even spoke face to face.
All right.
You know, like I think this is the first step, because honestly I've never, you know, we've all just been interacting through text on GitHub and different things. So
you could do an uptime challenge for the Jitsi chat that we're having right now, and see if we can keep it going, and just see how long it takes before everybody logs off, and just be like, yeah, fiber is awesome. You know, everyone that's got fiber connectivity, just let it run. Just a thought. But anyway, I know that that's probably a crazy idea.
Guys, while we're just you know, because I think I'm gonna bow out while we're talking about the uptime challenge. So I just wanted to ask, in terms of, you know, just assurance and you know, just DevSecOps, like, you know, testing the platform for vulns. What's the thinking there? Because a lot of community stations are going to use this thing. You know, even, I don't know, maybe I'm wrong, but a lot of people who are going to model their businesses and can't afford airtime initially might use this thing. And, you know, there should be some sort of assurance, you know, to guarantee like it's just got some security. What's the thinking there?
Right now,
there isn't much at the moment.
Sorry.
Okay, go ahead.
Yeah. But who wants to actually answer this one?
I can answer that one, because right now it really isn't a good idea to put like the LibreTime web interface onto the web. Period. It's full of vulnerabilities. That's not a good idea. What you can do is put Icecast on the web, and that's secure and everything, no issues there. But if you really want to have security, then you're not going to put that backend on the web. It's so simple. You need to put it behind a VPN or something.
I've got you.
That for the level of security.
Once we rewrite it to Django REST framework and get rid of this old PHP stack and the framework, which for sure has vulnerabilities, but no one is reporting them anymore because we shouldn't be using it anymore. Until we got past that, I wouldn't consider putting this on the web. But at my station, we are mad anyway, because we have it behind the web application firewall even, and VPN and everything. So I'm probably not the reference for a setup that usual people would have.
I get it. With my very rudimentary setup, I mean, I've just got, like I said initially, an Icecast reverse proxy sitting on an Nginx web server, but I don't have a WAF, and I'm not VPNing, so it's literally naked, aside from just the Icecast. So there is a little bit of a concern that you just raised, and I think how I'd like to contribute, because I'm not really more on the dev side, but when it comes to the infosec side, I think I could, like, you know, whip up a scanner and find vulns and like weed out the false positives, and you know, that's where I think maybe I can help the team. But I think then that'll need more like you know, Kyle and everybody else who's doing the rewrite to then signal once the rewrite is done. And then we can you know, stick a scanner on the app to see how many vulns come out.
We would also want to activate code scanning. GitHub recently bought up another company that does stuff in that space. It's called CodeQL, and they have pretty nice documentation on how to set it up. But it's also one of those things that if we set the code scanner off on like the current code base, it will find heaps of stuff, and we won't be fixing those in this code base. So that's I've experimented with this, but I've always held off on really doing anything seriously automated with it, because it just didn't make sense against a code base that I knew was quite broken.
Yeah. So I think what I'll do then is on the matters most chats, I'll just reach out to the community, just like for tips on hardening my setup, because right now I'm flying naked, as I said. But yeah, I'll also just wait for maybe the next meeting next month sometime, or whenever it is that the go ahead, once the green light has been given for the rewrite, then I think we can then have this conversation again.
And actually, talking about infosec stuff, the depend bot or depender bot is working. Depender bot is working on the repo, and I've merged one issue that it raised, though I see it's still bringing up the issue. But it's a gem file, so maybe Zach, I can sit with you later at some point and try work out what that's still doing.
Sure, definitely.
Okay, well, yeah. All right, that's me out, guys. I'm hoping that there's going to be like a recording or minutes or whatever the case may be.
Yeah.
Of this.
So there's a link in the minutes to the YouTube video, and that will remain up after the meeting.
Awesome stuff. Cheers, guys. Thanks for your time.
Cheers.
Cheers. Nice to meet you.
Yeah, good to meet you. So Andrew asks, so is it the API that's a mess or the whole code base? The issue is the majority of our code base at the moment is based on the Zend framework, which is no longer, or Zend 1, which is no longer maintained, and moving to Zend 2, or what's it now, 3?
And then they had a bunch of other weird little like micro things. And then I think it's all now, it's actually the company that owns Zend like sold off or something. Now there's a community supported version of Zend has replaced Zend as well. It's now they basically went the whole LibreTime route with Zend, but I think there's a little bit more money involved because there's a little bit bigger companies involved. So it's not quite as shoestring, but it is no longer a big company behind it, I don't think.
Yeah, so most of our stuff is dependent on that, and that doesn't support recent PHP versions. We also use Propal, which is also not really maintained anymore. So those dependencies are a big issue, and kind of the best way that we've seen to change that. No, not Purple. Propal, the database layer, essentially.
Oh, Propel, yeah.
Propel. There we go. So those are very much out of date, and the discussion kind of that we had in issue number, literally it's issue number 2.
Yeah.
One of the very first issues raised after this repo was created kind of revolved around rewriting things into a API kind of driven method, and please correct me if I'm wrong, I'm kind of going off memory and trying to summarize the thread. And so, yeah, it was kind of settled on. I say settled. I put a thing in. No one really said no, so I took it as a yes. To rewrite and then slowly replace that PHP with a API-driven front end that gives us a bit more flexibility and allows more custom kind of UIs if we want, or if people want to have a Electron app or an app that sits on the Playout PC for in-studio work, they can go ahead and be done.
Yeah. And I mean, one of the ideas that we were trying to do, and I think we talked about, and I brought up, and other people thought, was the idea of doing it as like the strangler method, where kind of you replace different functionalities so that in theory, the old thing's still working the whole time until we take out one part of the Zend and replace it with a new API-driven front end. The reality of that is not there yet, but that would be the next step. And I don't know how realistic it may just be. We just do a whole new version and tear it all out at once versus releasing part by part. But that will require somebody actually coding something that uses the work that you're doing, and then also dealing with. I mean, you already did a tremendous amount of work getting everything to Python 3, which was pretty heroic. So applaud, for that, because I thought, I didn't. Yeah, so I think, we could go that route.
Yeah, Caveman. Bob's input in the chat is Zawinski's law. Every program expands until it can do email. Funny that you say that, because it's currently an issue that we cannot.
Yeah, we that'll be the next step in LibreTime's evolution. We need to just install a whole mail stack for everybody so we can just make it even more insecure for them. No.
I mean, is there a way that we can just pull in like a Google CAPTCHA API to determine if they're human for the password reset?
But that means any human can take over anybody else's account, right? All you have to do is prove that. So somebody's account, and you're the bigger. Yeah. So we still need to have a way of contacting them outside of the web interface to verify that their request is legitimate. And the email is the standard, but most of the time people just contact me for our instance, or I just constantly have to reset their password. We originally didn't even want people to use LibreTime. We had everything going through our web interface, but our web interface is even older, using Drupal 6, so it's kind of ridiculous.
Gotcha. Because one thing for us is that we don't have it exposed to the internet. It's just on our internal network. And so to get to it from home, we actually SSH tunnel in, and then port forward, and then that's how we do that. So I mean, I guess it can phone home. Well, not phone home. It can contact Google, but then it doesn't have port forwarding to go back to it. So we can't do Let's Encrypt with certbot, which we were hoping to do, but we couldn't. So stuff like two-factor authentication, I don't know if that would work for us, and then for other stations who are just choosing it to keep it behind entirely behind a firewall because their port 80 is being used for their own API calls, for their own custom-built infrastructure, and then their 443 is being used for WebDAV.
I think the simplest solution for password resets is just we need to implement functionality to allow us to send to a separate SMTP server. Let someone else deal with that, as long as we can have a way of configuring the PHP at the moment. Settings in terms of your SMTP server, ports, credentials, all of that.
Yeah, you
don't need to worry about it.
You could set up a Google account and have that be your password if you didn't have your own email server or whatever.
Yeah.
And that would be the easiest way of fixing our existing lack of email. But I guess it's like all these things. It's like one of these things would probably take like a day to work on. And since we don't have anybody who's the boss making everybody saying, I'm the project manager, I'm paying your salary, you go work on this, it doesn't necessarily get done until somebody wants to do it, which, we have a huge issue queue because many people have many ideas, and they haven't been, they're closing right now mostly because of the lazy bot or whatever that is, that they're timing out more than they're getting solved. And I guess that's why we're all talking here. So.
Gotcha. I mean, it looks like our 7, well, I mean, at least the really big pain points, HTTPS support, removing Flash, fixing podcast publishing. I imagine those are the big ones that we should jump on first.
Getting SS, Flash is a good one. I mean, maybe we could, if we can figure out how to do that with the new API, that might even be better, because I don't even know, I know that the analytics code I wrote is kind of a monster, and the SQL calls are really inefficient because of the way I had to do them, and because it's so much data that it goes through. It takes a really long time to run on the server that I'm having. If you go back to try to do the show analytics, it's probably not the most efficient way to do the query, but it works. But it takes like sometimes minutes to run. So that's a good sign that there's some kind of various inefficiencies in terms of how I wrote that. So if we could rewrite the analytics code, that might be a good place to start playing with the new API.
Yeah, it could well be, because it's a fairly self-contained, fairly small side of the UI. So if we can, replace that Flash with a JavaScript thing that messes with the API, that'd be great. Bob asks, are you using external apps that query the DB directly? So not at the moment that I know of. There's not any apps that we don't present the database outward. But I think he's asking Rob, do you use an external app?
No, it's just done through the ORM. It's just done through PHP and the ORM. So I don't even remember what I did at this particular moment, but I just figured out a way to craft a query that gave the results that I wanted, that made more sense. And it probably could be, I don't know, that's the additional layer when you're dealing with an ORM. Like, you don't even get to write the SQL yourself. You have to deal with however they thought was the best way to write the code. So I don't know. I guess we'll be dealing with something with Django anyways, but there's a lot more people working on Django than there are working on Propel. So I think Django in theory would be a much better middleware for this kind of thing. Does this actually have its own ORM, or how does Django work in terms of interfacing with the database? Does it just kind of have a...
So it's got its own ORM. You define models, and then it does the translation from models, Python models, to SQL, including the generation of migrations forward and backwards.
How flexible is that? Is it really flexible?
Yeah, I mean, at the moment, I've got it mimicking our existing database. All it does is not manage the migrations for those tables.
Okay, cool.
But can it do everything that we need it to do? We're just not there yet.
I think so. I guess that the journey of writing this API is discovering what we actually need and what we don't. So I think it can. There's libraries to integrate with RabbitMQ and things like that, so we can continue doing those as well. I just haven't done that yet.
Yeah, that whole RabbitMQ to Airtime playout to Liquid Soap is something that somebody very brave is going to want to dig into at some point. Before I would suggest that anybody use this for a huge commercial endeavor or anything that they're really worried about. That's why it's always still been alpha quality software. We've been upfront with people. If anybody doesn't know what alpha is, and they're using it, I don't know. The fact that people are using it means that people need it. And we're trying to do our best to make it keep on working, but it is kind of, that there are some weird stuff happen where like two tracks will play at the same time, or all of a sudden it'll go dead air. I tried to put on a FLAC track once, and it all of a sudden started playing 5 things at once because I didn't have FLAC support built in. This is for my own show, so my own show got really mangled. So there's some kind of, I don't know, figuring out the Liquid Soap interface would be another. Like, how are we going to get it so it works directly with the Airtime playout? I guess that's the part that's really the core of what LibreTime does, is provide this schedule that in turn gets communicated to Liquid Soap. So how close are we to, would we need to write RabbitMQ support?
So what I've done is I've avoided it.
Okay, makes sense.
I've let the Python apps that use that, so the Pipo, Liquid Soap, and I think it's Pipo and Pipo Liquid Soap. I've let them handle that, and
Okay.
in my rewrite or using the new API and the API client, simply replicated exactly what the old API gave them, so that they continue working as before.
Okay, so we're just basically right. So do we actually have the ability to do stuff with it right now?
No, I'm so at the moment I am busy rewriting or implementing I think it was getting the schedule from the new API. So I fetch it from the database, that's fine, or fetch it from Django. But I'm now just busy manipulating it into the same format as before.
Okay. For the play out for the back end or for the front end?
I think the format's taken from what Liquid Soap expects, so that Pipo can kind of just hand it off without having to do much manipulation. So it's a bit of a mess, but actually not as much of a mess as I initially thought. The RabbitMQ and the API end up working together and then going into this Pipo Liquid Soap app, a Python app, and then that's what deals with the Liquid Soap instance.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, because
I guess it could be worse.
The RabbitMQ, yeah.
I looked at it a bit quite recently because I got to talk to one of the guys from another station in Switzerland, and it was actually like the guy that forced Source Fabric to actually implement Pipo the way it is.
Okay.
There was a project that they actually paid Source Fabric to do for them. But he ended up writing most of that Python code and then just forcing it onto Source Fabric, kind of.
Oh, wow.
And yeah, it is you see how old it is, and that's, I think, the main thing that needs rewriting. But I think how it works, we have another software at our station that we use to do some similar stuff, which is also Liquid Soap based. And we've seen more issues with that when we started moving stuff into the actual Liquid Soap code base. So like having a separate Python script that Liquid Soap can just call seems to have led to a system that where the Liquid Soap stuff performs rather okay-ish. With our setup, which is audio over IP, we've noticed that if Liquid Soap doesn't perform okay, we get artifacts on the station instantly.
Yeah.
So it's really a bit difficult to touch that whole thing because Liquid Soap could at any moment start doing really weird stuff. But then again, it's Liquid Soap. I was hoping that we can get updated to like 1.4 before we look into really changing much of the Liquid Soap stuff, because
yeah.
And with that, I would also think we should at some point get rid of 1.1 support, because that's also been kind of like, at least for me, been blocking me at working on the whole how to extend the Liquid Soap feature, which would allow for a lot of feature requests as well.
I've run into problems with this as well, because on test installation here on my small local cloud here in the basement, I tried to replace Liquid Soap with a newer version to try to implement SSL on the Liquid Soap interfaces, and that basically made the virtual server spin at 100%. So there seem to be incompatibilities actually in the Liquid Soap interface between the major versions. So we have to be very careful with replacing any of that, and that I think goes for most of the parts that are glued together at the moment, because this is at the moment the software architecture looks like a big Lego house.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so we did merge supports. Rob, you did it, but it was support for both 1.1 and 1.3 at the same time. I don't know whether that happened before or after alpha.9, alpha.8.
After.
Yeah, I mean, I basically just did a simple one-line fix that rewrites something to be compatible with 1.3 in terms of they just changed their configuration arbitrarily, so it wasn't a very big.
There we go. Cool. So Andrew asks, Ram, are you talking about jitter? Always wondered about liquid soap. What it does exactly is it is the connection between Icecast and the LibreTime core database, etc. So Andrew, the liquid soap is essentially an audio playout language. So you write scripts in liquid soap and it does things like create a Icecast harbor so you can stream to it or play video. It does do video too, but play audio out. So LibreTime uses it as the back end for all our playout and our live input. So all the schedule, all the shows that are scheduled that have tracks, those tracks eventually make their way to a liquid soap script. And then that script is what is used to actually play the audio out onto the Icecast stream. So yeah, the current alpha.8 requires a patch to liquid soap to support newer liquid soap versions. So if you're running on Buster or Ubuntu, I think 18.04, could be wrong there. It requires that to be fixed. However, master or any commits after, I'd need to check when that was actually done.
Let me look. It might even be in the last one. We might have released something afterwards.
Let me check.
I think it's only in the prepared release notes, but we didn't release that one yet.
Okay.
Here we go. It was the 5th of Jan. So yeah, it hasn't been merged yet.
Yeah, it'll
so
be in
any
Alpha 9.
Commits after the 5th of Jan
Okay.
would have support for both and doesn't need patching.
The patching
okay,
thing
Bob
has
says
a link in
Ubuntu
the
18.04 worked without patching
Yeah.
anything. I used to have a matrix of what supported what. I think it's in the wiki, but who knows if it's up to date anymore.
Yeah, I mean, currently we won't support 20.04 until Propel gets either a patch merged or we upgrade. So, or we figure out some other route to make it work. Just because that is when because PHP is going to continue to change, and none of the stuff that we're working on will work without a lot of additional work from somebody to make it work. So.
Okay, we have been going on for 2 hours, so I think maybe we leave it there.
Yeah.
Thanks so much for everyone for joining. My last point before we go, I would like to do this more regularly. So kind of looking, and this is where I'd need input, maybe once a month or once every 2 months.
I could do once a month if it wasn't 2 hours.
Yeah.
Yeah, and actually a month from now will be Christmas, so.
Oh, fair point.
We may not want to do it exactly a month from now, so maybe starting towards the beginning of the month, like January.
Yeah, maybe look at beginning of January, and then evaluate and maybe do a month every month from there on, and try keep it a bit shorter.
Sounds good.
Cool. I shall create a discourse post about that and start working towards the next one then.
All right. Thank you so much for setting us up.
Sounds
It's great to
good.
see all you guys
Yeah,
and hear from all
thanks.
the cool
It's
users.
great seeing everyone.
Yeah, great to meet you all.
Thanks, guys. Great to meet everybody. It was really cool.
Everybody, take care.
All right.
Cool. Thanks so much.
All right.
Cheers.
Bye-bye.
Later.